Hello and welcome everyone to yet another talk at the Gaming Academy. Today we have a very special guest, Rami Ismail. So Rami is a game developer slash currently he loves to fly planes. He's been doing that for quite a while. And one third of the podcast, Habibis, half of Lambier, and just overall a pretty cool guy, I would say. So Rami is going to be giving a quick talk on surprise game dev and the world of game dev basically. So I'll just leave it to him to tell you everything that we currently don't know. So Rami,
nice. Yeah. Sorry, one more time. How much time do we have?
Yes.
So, yes, that's a good amount of time. But just to know how long awesome. I'm going to be talking.
Yeah, you had asked us to put aside 2.5 hours, but honestly, we don't have any courses after you. So
okay,
take your time.
Well, then we're just going to do a talk for the first, I don't know, probably 40 minutes, 50 minutes. And after that, we'll just open it up to Q&A. Does that sound good?
Amazing.
Okay. Do you all have my screen on the screen? Can you see what I'm presenting? Yep. All right, cool. Then let's get started. So, hi, assalamu alaikum. My name is Rami Ismail. I'm formerly one half of Dutch independent game studio Vlambeer, the creator of the free indie tool Presskit. I ran an international games event called Game Dev World, which allowed talks to be visible in 8 different languages and would translate both the speaker and the questions. I hosted the #1 reason to be panel for several years, in which I tried to make sure that people from underrepresented locations around the world would have a moment in the spotlight to talk about what game development is like in their country. I write Leveling the Playing Field, a sometimes bi-weekly newsletter. Currently, it's on a little bit of a hiatus, but I'm starting it back up again about the business of game development. And I tweet way too much, just frankly, just an unreasonable amount of tweets that I should really stop doing that. But I wouldn't be here if I wasn't stubborn, so I guess I'm just gonna keep tweeting. My apologies for that. I want to have a quick talk about pulling together a business case, or to say it more easily, how to fund a dream in 100 simple slides. And there has to come a bit of a disclaimer with this, because all advice is bad advice, right? The truth of advice, and any advice you're going to get here, for example, is that it comes from somebody, and that somebody has gone through life doing certain things, and those, given the fact that I'm talking to you right now, it seems those things have worked out. But that doesn't mean that those same things will work out now. In the end, every single piece of advice that you get is also an opinion. So when you listen to this talk, think about who I am, about what I do, about why I would give certain types of advice, but not other types of advice. Try to collect, when you go into this business, as much advice from different types of people as possible, and then kind of figure out what parts of what advice fit best with you, because your situation is unique. That means that every advice you get is good in some ways and bad in some ways. And it might just be not relevant to you, but it might be super relevant to you. So listen to this talk, try to look for things that you feel right when it comes to advice or your situation, and then write those down. And for everything that makes you think, what is Rami talking about? This is nonsense. Just ignore it. And then in 5 years' time, when you're super rich and super successful, just come tell me that I was wrong, because nothing would make me happier. Okay. So with that out of the way, let's give a little bit of context of who I am, so you kind of understand where I am coming from. I started independent development about 12 years ago, 13 years by now. And back then, independent game development was very different, just completely different. Independent developers were very anti-publisher. At that time, the Devolver Digitals and Raw Furies of our time didn't exist yet. Publishers were these large corporations that only bet on large games. So we kind of hated publishers. They were kind of like the opposite of what we wanted to do. We wanted to be independent, to make our own choices, to make our own games, to have our own successes, but also have our own failures. And then Devolver Digital and some of those early indie publishers pulled what is probably the greatest trick in the history of video games, which is the creation of indie game publishers created a need for indie game publishers. You see, when I was making my first games, there were no indie publishers. So you made a game and then you released it and you marketed it. And the only thing you had to do is market it better than the next indie. And none of us were very good at marketing. But then the first indie publishers appeared, and they obviously didn't have all the risks of making the video game. They operated much faster and much more agile. They had a bit more money than we did because they were usually funded from the tech world. So they invested in 3 different games. And that meant that it was much easier for them to do marketing because they could keep their connections with the press swarm. They always had news. They always had games. Their audience grew much faster. And now, if I wanted to make a game, I didn't have to just market better than the other indies. I also had to market better than the indie publisher. I was never going to be able to do that because the indie publisher had way more games, had way more time and effort and money to spend on marketing. And thus, just by the fact that indie publishers existed, we started needing indie publishers. Now, listening to this, you might think that I'm still anti-publisher, and I'm not anti-publisher. I actually think they have great benefits, that our industry probably would be in a much worse spot if it wasn't for these indie publishers. They create opportunity for people that don't have money yet to make games that they otherwise couldn't make. They create focus where developers can focus on the things they're best at, the creative part of game development, the technical part of game development, without having to worry about the marketing or business side of game development all too much. So with that said, I'm not anti-publisher, but I'm also not pro-publisher. I believe that there's a time and place for a publisher or for a fund or for a grant or for an investor. And that really all that you're looking for is what is best for you. So for those of you who want to be independent, this talk is mostly going to be about being an entrepreneur. For those of you who don't want to be independent, this talk might give you a good insight into how the money part of the games industry thinks about video games, which might be relevant when you start applying or when you start looking at companies that you want to be a part of. Just seeing how they think will help you focus your application better on what they need. So this talk, 100 slides, split into 10 topics. We're going to go through all of these. So we're going to start with entrepreneurship. We're going to go through risk, opportunities, values, thinking from funding, defining needs, making strengths from weaknesses, your pitch, reaching out, negotiation, the contract, and then finally development. Now, note that this ends with development. That's where game development properly starts. That means that everything before that kind of happens before production on your game start, which seems a little wild, but that's how we're going to do it. So let's start with entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is actually not that complicated. The definition of entrepreneurship is taking on financial risk in the hope of profit. That's all you're doing. You're taking a financial risk and you're hoping that you're going to profit more than you spent, right? That means that most entrepreneurship fails because obviously not everything can succeed. So when you look at it from that perspective, it seems pretty obvious that there is a large risk in starting a game studio or being a game studio, and that only after you've been successful, the risk starts to lower. Entrepreneurship, I think, kind of consists out of different things, but I think the most important thing is setting goals. And I think there's different categories of goals. I think you have your short-term goals. I think you have your medium-term goals and your long-term goals. Your short-term goals are 1 to 6 months. Your medium-term goal is probably a year, year and a half, and your long-term goal is like 2.5 years plus. And I ask a lot of indies when they're starting out what their goal is, right? What is your goal? What is your short-term goal? What's your medium-term goal? What is your long-term goal? And indies give me all sorts of different answers. And for these indies that I meet that are working on their first game or that are working on their first commercial game, I always tell them that their goal is wrong. The goal for them, the goal for you as a first-time indie should be very simple. The simplest goal of all of them. Make a game and ship it. Preferably without taking a loss. That's it. That's it. That's the goal. That's the full goal. Here's the reality. The biggest problem for your business and reputation is that you haven't shipped anything yet. Nothing of the skill that you intend to create. So if you can just be back exactly where you are right now, not more money, not more anything, but you shipped the game, that will be a huge improvement over where you started. If you can add some sub goals to that, have a better team or more money or a bigger audience, then even better. But if you can be back exactly where you are with the same people, with no money, with nothing new, no bigger audience, but you've shipped a game, you're already in so much better a spot because your reputation will go from somebody who hasn't shipped a game to somebody who has shipped a game. And that difference is huge. Now, your second goal after that is really simple. It is continue to make games. And you might notice that I've underscored that as. If you ship a game, then your goal becomes to continue to make games, plural. Continuity becomes your biggest challenge, not just shipping a game, but shipping a game in such a way that you can start on shipping your next game, no matter what your other goals are, no matter what other achievements you want, whether you want to be a human-centric studio, whether you want to make blockbuster games, whether you want to make a fan favorite or cult hits or weird roguelikes or real-time strategy games, or I don't care what your other goals are. These two goals are required for you to run your studio. So no matter what your other goals are, you likely cannot achieve those goals. Without continuing the studio. So continue to make games, not one, but plural. So in short, your goal is to make a game. You're going to do that by working with game developers, with game artists, with game designers, other game specialists, game technology, the games press, and games media. So what you're going to sell as your product, the thing you're going to focus on first, is you're going to sell a business case. Not a game. You see, there's really only two ways of doing business. One, you maximize your opportunity. Two, you minimize your risk. You can sit somewhere in the middle, right? But the reality is that every business strategy has a preference towards maximizing opportunity or minimizing risk. If you're maximizing opportunity, you're pushing for maximum profits by taking more risks. You then, within that, try to minimize your risks as much as possible. For example, if you're fairly confident in your brand and you're making a game that you're fairly confident will sell, then you're going to negotiate very aggressively, even if you only have one person to negotiate with, because the point is to maximize your profits. And, you're going to minimize risk within that. If you feel that they're backing off a little, the people that you're negotiating with, you're obviously going to tone it down a bit, but you're going to be very aggressive to maximize your profits. If you're minimizing risks, you're pushing for maximum safety by making safe choices. You're trying to maximize your opportunity as much as possible within that, but your main goal is to minimize your risk. A really clear example is actually the opposite. If you're negotiating, only negotiate up if you're certain that you have a backup that you can fall back on if that negotiation fails. If you're going to be minimizing risk. You're not going to make as much money, but you're also not going to lose as much money if things go wrong. So when you're starting out, I want you to minimize risk. We're going to minimize risk because the goal does not include money. Remember, the goal is quite simple. Just ship a video game, not get rich, not get famous. There's no point in playing risky at this point in your career. If this is your first studio, if this is your first game, if this is your first commercial project as a team, minimize your risk, right? So how do you do that? How do you minimize your risk? If you're going to be making a video game, years of work with a small team of people, how do you minimize risk as much as possible? Well, it's actually quite simple. You move most of the risk involved in your game development process to somebody else as soon as possible. And that's what we call funding. When people talk about funding, they're not actually talking about getting money. What they're talking about is shifting the risk, the financial risk, from themselves to somebody else. Because you're not actually getting money. You're effectively taking a loan from a publisher. You could do that through plenty of other methods that don't remove your risk. You could get a loan, but then, you know, the money has to come back with an interest. You can get a mortgage, but then now your house is dependent on whether or not your game does it. Either way, you're in funding, what you're doing is you're moving your risk to somebody else who's more enabled to take on that risk. But there's one big problem. The game doesn't exist yet, which is why we're not selling a game. We're selling a promise. When I said we're selling a business case, that promise is your business case. And the value of your business case is speculative. It doesn't actually have money. It only has money insofar that somebody wants to pay for it. If nobody pays for it, its value is zero. If somebody pays for it, the value is whatever that person pays for it. So the value of your business case is equal to what you can get anybody to pay for your game. That's how simple it is. Now, a lot of people ask me, okay, so the game doesn't exist yet. We're selling a promise. Nice. That person is listening really well to this talk, really well. Well, Sami, you need to remove that push to talk from the button. It's not good. Anyway,
sorry about that. We will.
It's okay. It happens. It happens. Anyway, the value of your business case is speculative. It's only worth as much as you can convince anybody to pay for it. So how do you select a good game, right? How do you pick a good game for your business case? Well, this is the part where it gets really simple. Actually, more simple than anything you could ever imagine. All you do, literally all you do, is you forget about business. This is the part where you dream. You don't think about budgets. You don't think about timelines. Dream about a game that you believe should exist, something that you think would be special, would be unique, would be cool, something that you think your studio can make. Like, here's the reality. If you're an indie, you're a creative, and you likely don't have the data or capacity or the resources to play the market the way the AAAs do. We don't have data analysts. We don't have access to very, very specific data on how the industry works. No, very straightforward. You dream. You dream. Dream of a game that you believe should exist. Don't care about budget. Don't care about timeline. Dream. Okay, you got that dream. If you have that dream, let's prototype. Let's go do some business. The prototype, make it quick, make it dirty. Bad code, throw away code. I literally do not want to see a single line of code that was written more slowly because it's more maintainable. I want you to make this prototype so bad that after you're done with it, you want to burn it because it's so poorly written in code. I want it to be fast. I want it to be so fast that you have your game working within a day, within 2 days. I don't want none of this nonsense of making it modular, making it good, building your engine. I do not care. Fast, quick, dirty, bad code, bad art, bad music, bad sounds, bad everything. Bad everything. Prototype. Mockups are more important than implementation right now because we're going to evaluate the idea and its viability later. But for now, first you need to know whether your dream is an interesting game. So you prototype. Okay. Let's move to risk, opportunities, and value. This is quite straightforward. Your risks are that you have no money. Your team and experience are likely low on a global scale. And your reputation is non-existent. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody cares about you. Your opportunity then is quite straightforward. Your opportunity is that you can't go down from where you started. Like you're literally at the bottom. So your opportunity is that any of these things could go up. Your money could go up. Your team and experience will go up. Your reputation will go up. That's your opportunity. Now, there's one problem. Every studio has a value. And that value partially decides how much money you can earn in the games industry. So your value is money, team and experience, and reputation, which means your value is 0. Now, your value actually differs per group that you're talking to. Your audience will value you mostly by your reputation and getting value for their money. If they pay for a game, they expect it to be good. Publishers and platforms, they don't care about any of that. You can have made 7 bad games, but if you have the team, the experience to make an 8th game, and that game could be good, then they don't care about the 7 previous games. They just care that you ship them, because that proves your team and your experience. And your own ability to continue, your value to yourself is mostly dependent on money, because you need that money to continue. So value is looked at from very different ways, from very different groups. But the important part that we're going to take away from here is that team and experience is the thing that publishers and platforms will care about most. Your ability to ship. That's it. So let's think about funding. Because here's the thing. That same thing we just did for you, that's what everybody else in the industry is doing. Your competitors are doing that, but also the people that want to fund you are doing that. The platforms are doing that. They're thinking about what are our risks, what are our opportunities, what is our value. Now, we can start with their risks, because their risks are none of our business. That's their problem, not yours. Like their risks are loss of investment, loss of reputation. From the developer side, uncertainty or inexperience. Like their risks are their problem. It's up to them to evaluate that. It's up to them to make decisions. If they make a bad decision there, that's not our problem, right? Their opportunity is a little bit simpler. Like here's the thing. Money, the way money works for you and me is not the same way money works for an investor. When an investor spends money, they're spending it on something with a speculative value. So when you try to negotiate with an investor as if they think about money the same way we do, you're always going to fail, because you need to accept that if you go into games and you get successful, you have to accept that you'll walk into a supermarket and you'll be 100% right to say that this bar of chocolate is expensive, but then also go home and negotiate hundreds of thousands of dollars in funding and say it's not enough, right? Publishers think about money in a very different way, because the way they think about money is, can we multiply this money? Because they have plenty. They have more than enough money. So they can invest in several games to get a return on investment. And the return they're looking for is really straightforward. It is 3 times or more. And it's a very logical number. 3 times or more is a very logical number. It's if they invest $100,000 in you and they make $300,000, then they can invest $100,000 in your next game or a similar game. They can invest $100,000 in a different type of game, and then keep $100,000 as pure profit. If you can repeat that 1 in every few games, you're in business. You'll be a highly profitable business, because if the 2 games that you fund with that $300,000 fails, you still have that $100,000 buffer. So you can technically invest in up to 3 games if you need to. But if you don't, just keep the money. So their opportunity is quite straightforward. They will sell your game under their brand. They grow with that, their portfolio and their audience, and they get a reputational gain from aligning with up-and-coming developers. So for a publisher, the opportunity of publishing a game that does well actually means that all their games will sell better. So them having that money effectively allows them to take a gamble on something that will make them even more money structurally in the future. So that's why when Devolver Digital releases a game, they don't talk about the name of the developer. What Devolver game do you remember the developer of? I mean, I know the Vlambeer ones because, you know, I was Vlambeer. Some people might know the Hotline Miami devs, Denaton. Who else? The point is, what they want is for you to think of games as a Devolver game. Because if you think of it as a Devolver game, you've connected the brand of Devolver to good games. And that's what they want. On the flip side, their opportunity is landing exclusivity deals or deals with subscription services to offset their own risk and accessing funding options that you might not even think about. If you have a game and you get it funded for $100,000 with a publisher, the first thing that publisher is going to do is they're going to turn around and they're going to talk to Game Pass, they're going to talk to PlayStation, they're going to talk to Apple Arcade, they're going to talk to Stadia, they're going to talk to all of those platforms, they're going to talk to Epic Game Store, they're going to talk to all of these platforms to see if they can get $150,000, $200,000, $300,000 out of it, because they have very good connections with those platforms. So even if you sell a game for them at a good deal, the first thing they're going to do is already try to make more money off of it. So I talk to a lot of indies who frankly are terrible at setting budget. They will come up with, for this game, we need $100,000, $150,000, $150,000. And they'll go to Microsoft and they'll say, well, you know, $150,000 is a lot of money. We'll ask for a little less. We'll ask for $100,000. I want you for one moment to think about this. Microsoft has 181,000 full-time employees. And Microsoft, I picked Microsoft for no reason. There's no big reason why I picked Microsoft. Could have been any other company, but Microsoft has 181,000 full-time employees. Let's assume that a lunch for an employee costs $1. That means that most debut games for independent developers can be funded by Microsoft if they just skip 1 to 2 days of paying lunch for their people. That's it. Literally 1 to 2 days of lunch. That's what we're looking at when we're funding our big game. So if you ever think about that's too much money, I don't know if they can afford it, like, please get out of here. They can afford it. So what publishers do, unlike us, is they're looking to maximize opportunity. Healthy publishers are always looking to maximize opportunity. So that is what we're going to sell them. That's the business case we're going to try and sell them. We're going to try to sell them a business case where they maximize opportunity. And then within that, because no matter which you pick, you're always looking to do the other as secondary goal. They're going to be looking to minimize their risk. There's a lot of supplies. There's a lot of games out there. So we'll need to make sure that we communicate to them how small the risks are relative to the competition, how minimal the risks are, how big the opportunity, how small the risk. So in your communication with these publishers, it's basically continuous exercise in emphasizing your opportunities and de-risking your potential risk, right? So when you talk to a publisher, those two things should always be on your mind, or any fund, right? You're emphasizing your opportunities, you're de-risking your potential risks. So then think about the transaction for a bit. The transaction is, what do they offer and what can you offer that they need, right? Well, they offer money, they offer structure, they offer services, they offer reputation. You offer a product that they can publish, a video game. It's pretty straightforward. Now, there is one more thing I want to talk about before we continue much further. I call it the big publisher lie. The big publisher lie is very simple. Publishers have convinced indies, almost all indies, of this lie. And the lie is very simple. It's a lie that indies have come to tell each other. It's a lie that everybody talks about. Everybody just talks about it as if it's true. The reality is that it's false. It's a lie. The lie is that publishers fund video games. Publishers don't fund video games. Publishers purchase publishing rights. Then you take that money that you got for the publishing rights and you fund the game with that. Now, this seems like it's not a big deal, but it's actually critical to surviving in this games industry to understand it. Your budget isn't connected to what you need to make the game. It's a very straightforward way for publishers, and this is why they tell that lie, why this lie has become such a big thing. For publishers, knowing what you need to make the game is a very easy way to say, okay, we'll pay you what you need plus a little bit extra, but no more than that. So they minimize their risk by convincing you to show them what you need to make the game. Think about it this way. If I have a team of 3 people and I'm going to work on a small multiplayer game for 1.5 years, and it's a game about a group of astronauts backstabbing each other on a space station, right? And I say we need 3 people, we need 1.5 years. Let's say we need 2 years, right? 3 people, 2 years. And each of those people gets $50,000 a year. That's for 1 year, $150,000. For 2 years, $300,000. That's a pretty risky bet. A multiplayer game about astronauts, that's not a big deal. Obviously, and chat already guessed, that game exists. It's called Among Us. Think of it this way. If that same team goes back to that same publisher today and they say, hey, we're going to make a sequel to the game with the astronauts and the backstabbing, and we're still 3 people. We still need $50,000 a year, and we still need 2 years. Do you think at that point that $300,000 is what they should be asking for? Of course not. Of course not. They should ask for millions, maybe even towards hundreds of millions, right? Because Among Us is one of the most powerful brands. Like, I was just visiting a random place and they had Among Us plushies. They can ask for way more because the publisher is buying publishing rights. They're not funding your game. And this is why that difference is so important to remember. Because if you're thinking that they're funding your game, you're always going to let them get away with giving you just a little bit more than what you actually need. Well, the reality is that you should be asking for what you think the game is going to be worth. So let's define our needs. Not for the publisher yet. We're just going to define our needs for ourselves. What we need is very simple. We need team, time, and budget. Those 3 things. The team usually exists out of design, art, code, sound, yourself. That's your team. That's what you deliver. And normally, publishing situation, production and marketing will be both on your side and on the publisher side. And then a typical publishing relationship, QA and localization will be on the publisher side. Generally, these are the expertises you need on a team. There's a lot of different expertise that you generally should have on a team. People can obviously be multiple of these things at once. I don't really want to go into this too deep, but let's say that the shortcut is this is what you need. Now, in terms of time, you need more than you think. Honestly, I do consultancies when it's been developers, and most of my consultancies about business cases start with, you're going to need an extra year. The problem is there's really no way to know how long it's going to take you to make a game if you don't even have the team together. But we can still think about what you would need. For most small indie games, you would normally assume 1.5 to 2 years. For most bigger indie games, you assume 2 to 3 years. And then you split it up basically as follows. You're going to split it up like this. You're going to start with your prototype. And those are small prototypes. Again, not big, quick, dirty, bad code. Burn them when you're done. They're proof of concept for the important or uncertain aspects of your game. So you're not even building a prototype that has everything in it. Isolate the things you need to test and test it. The next is your vertical slice. It's a larger prototype. That larger prototype will show a clear intent and a direction for the game. At that point, you go into production. At production, your game has clear goals, obvious uncertainties, have answers, theoretical answers, but answers. Production starts. You produce the game until you hit alpha. And alpha officially, I don't know, like game companies keep using alpha and different words for marketing in the public eye, but alpha technically means feature complete. All the features in the game are functional. Everything you could do in the game can be done, even if it's just once, right? If there is a dialogue system, then, technically feature complete means that there needs to be a dialogue system and one conversation in which you can have dialogue. At that point, you can check it off. Beta is content complete. At that point, not just the features are there, but all the content is there as well. Finally, you go to release candidate. Release candidate is quite straightforward. At that point, you're doing polish, you're doing localization, you're doing testing. When those things are done, the game goes in for certification. That is your release candidate. Every time you submit a game for certification or release a game, submit a game for launch, that's called a release candidate. Now, obviously, you might fail, and the release candidate might be rejected. You keep returning to making new release candidates with more polish, with more localization, with more testing. And then when it passes, that's launch. If you can afford it, and only if you can afford it, think about adding QA steps at production, at alpha, and at beta, so that you're not doing all the QA at the end of beta, right? Just make sure that you're doing QA much earlier in the process so that you can catch things much sooner. This specific way of splitting up your game is basically what every major studio in the games industry uses. The way they're de-risking, the way they're setting it up, it always looks like a variant of this. So if you're not doing it this way, if you don't know the answers to these questions, when is prototype, when is vertical slice, when is production start, what are we delivering on those dates, then you need to step that up. Because for any publisher, it's going to be important that what you're presenting seems reasonable. So each of those steps needs a clear deliverable. More importantly, each of those steps needs a margin. So you can't just figure out how much time you need to do something. You need the time you need to do something plus a percentage on top of it to make sure that if it takes long, if there's problems, if the person doing it gets sick, no matter what happens, that you're still going to be on budget. So you need to add a margin on top of that. Personally, I tend to say you take the amount of months you need, and then you add 3 months, and then on that total, you add 30%. That's what I normally do. Now, obviously, if your game is very short, if it's a 6-month development time, then adding 3 months is too much. But if you're doing a normal 1.5 to 2 year development cycle, then the amount of months you need plus 3 months plus 30% is a good call. And then your budget is quite straightforward. It is a comfortable salary for everybody you need on the team, multiplied by the amount of months plus those 3 months. And do you know why those 3 months are? Those 3 months are because after your game comes out, it takes 3 months for Steam, Apple, Epic Game Store, Xbox, PlayStation, whatever. It takes at least 3 months for them to pay $1 to your account. So you take the amount of months you need, you take the 3 months where you're waiting for money, and then over that total, you add 30%. Then on top of that, you add your overhead or your additional costs. And then on top of that, that entire number, you add an additional 30% margin. Now, the 30% margin is there in case of emergency. I found that generally 30% will make sure that you make it to the finish line. But in case you get to the finish line faster, that 30% is just profit, and you keep it. So that's nice. I would never try to go for a budget without that margin built in, for various reasons that we'll get back to later, but mostly because we're here to try and minimize our risks. Having money throughout the full process, no matter how the game performs, is an important part of minimizing risk. So just to go over the budget ranges real quick, anything between those ranges is kind of the same to most publishers. So a small game normally sets to normally is a $70,000 to $200,000 budget. Small publishers will publish those kind of games. Medium games are about 300K to 3 million, and then large games are about 5 million. For a lot of publishers, whether you are a 70K game or a 100K game, a 300K game or a 500K game, a 5 million game or a 7 million game, it doesn't matter. As long as you stay within those budget ranges, you're going to be fine. So if you have a budget and it's $100,000, you can also get $130,000. And most publishers won't even notice it as a difference. But, and here comes the but. The but is quite simple. The budget needs to be viable. No matter what you're asking, the budget needs to be viable. And to prove that viability, we're going to do a very simple trick. There's something called the box slider number. And the box slider number is quite straightforward. A few years ago, 10 years ago or something, Mike Boxlider, an independent developer, realized that there was not a lot of information on how competing games were performing, how games in a genre were performing. Steam did not have that information public. Apple didn't. Nobody had that information public. But indies share amongst each other. So Mike started asking indies how much certain games sold. He got honest answers from them. And what he did is he compared that number to the only visible number we have on Steam. The amount of reviews. It's the only number we have. What Mike realized is that there is a correlation between the amount of reviews and the amount of revenue. Now, since then, indies every few years recalculate the box slider number. The original box slider number was like 1 in 67. Now it's down to 1 to 50, 40 something. But basically, you take the amount of reviews, you multiply it by the box slider number, and you get a good approximation of how many units a game sold. Now, it works very simple. You go on Steam, or whatever platform you're going to launch it on. But Steam is, for a lot of indies, is probably the best place to start. You find comparable games. With comparable, I mean games that have similar mechanics, games that have similar art style, games that have similar narrative. It doesn't have to be all of them, even just one of them is fine. You find comparative games that made an approximate revenue of 70% of your game. They find a second game that made about 130% of your game. And then you find the final game that made 300% of the budget you need, right? So 70% of your budget, 130% of your budget, and 300% of your budget. Now look at those games. Look at the 70% game. If you imagine the final version of your game, the game that you're pitching, the game that you're talking about right now, and you compare it to the 70% game, you need to look at those games and you need to be 100% convinced that the majority of people will pick your game between the two. If they had a choice between those two games, they will take your game. for the 130% game, you need to imagine your game, and you need to imagine the 130% game next to each other. You need to imagine that about half of the people will pick your game and half of the people will pick the other game. If it's more than that, that's also good. Finally, that 300% game you're going to look at, and you need to feel like there is a chance, even if it's a small chance, there is a chance, a real chance, a chance that you can defend, that you can argue, that your game might do as well as the 300% game. If you can do that, if that makes sense, the 70% game, your game is clearly better. 100%, 30% game, your game is equal. And the 300% game, you might make it. If everything works out perfectly, you might make it. If you can get those three, and what I just said is correct, their budget is viable. Now, if you grab that first game, the 70% game, and you look at it and you're really honest with yourself, and you go like, that 70% game is better than the game that I'm thinking of making. Their budget is too high. You need to adjust your budget and then recalculate. If you look at the 300% game and you look at it, you're like, our game is much better, then your budget is too low. You need to up your budget and then recalculate and find the new games to compare against, right? So it's really straightforward. This is exactly how publishers do it. Because what they're looking for is the 130% case, quite simple. That is earning back what they invested plus the 30% that Steam is going to take from them, right? That's why it's 130%. And the 300%, that's their 3x case. That's the one they're trying to hit. So you need to be confident that you can hit that break-even case at least. And you need to be fairly confident that you might hit that 3x case. That's it. If that works out, your budget is realistic, and it doesn't matter what the number is. If the number is 1 million, and in the $700,000 game, you're clearly going to beat it. The $1.3 million game, you're pretty even with it. The $3 million game, you might make it. Then $1 million is correct. If at a $100,000 budget, you cannot beat the $70,000 game, then $100,000 is too much. If at a $100,000 budget, the $300,000 game looks like it doesn't stand a chance against you, you should be asking for $300,000. And then, then there's your services. These are services that are generally provided by the publisher: localization, quality assurance, marketing, community management, release management. These are not costs that you include in your budget. These are not part of your margin. These are not part of any money that we're talking about. These are all paid for by the publisher. Okay. So it might sound like a lot, but it's really quite simple. Look for games, prove to yourself that the publisher is going to make back their money. That's it. And if you just remember 70, 130, 300, you're good. Now, the next step is we've established our needs. Our needs will generally overlap with our weaknesses, right? Every need that we have relates to something that we can't do ourselves. So now we're going to start thinking about okay. Now we're going to start thinking about how we communicate our business case. And that means that we're going to look at things from a funder's perspective, from the publisher's perspective. And this is a thing that everybody messes up. You mess it up. Everybody who's ever pitched a game messes this up. And it's infuriating. I do not need you to communicate what you have right now. I need you to communicate the dream. For any communication with any funding partner, I want you to communicate the dream. And the dream needs to be realistic. You will need to back up your dream with ways you can achieve it. But you can dream up whatever budget, whatever funding, whatever team, so as the budget is viable. If you need 50 people, but the game you've dreamt up with the 70, 130, 300% rule, those numbers check out, then you can start a game studio with 50 people. it's fine. Because I would be, as a funder, I will be confident that I will make 3 times as much money. If you need 10 people, you can get 10 people. If you need 5 years, you can have 5 years, as long as 70, 130, 300. Nobody cares where your game is now. Literally nobody cares. Publishers just care for where you are right now to check whether you can achieve your game, whether you can actually develop what you're making. That's why they want the prototype. They don't care about where the prototype is right now. They just care whether it proves that you can make your game. That's what the prototype is for. So I don't want you to talk to me about where the game is or what you're going to add next week. I don't care. I literally don't care. Nobody cares. The only thing I care about is what is it going to be like when you are done with this game? What is the user going to buy? That's what we communicate. So to make this interactive for a second, I have a few questions for you. And I want you to answer them. Just, put in chat what you think the answer is. Well, the answer is already on this one, so that's a lot easier. A previously shipped game that was good but performed very poorly is a positive for a publisher. Why is it a positive? Why is, if you've shipped a game and the game was good but it performed very poorly, why is that a positive thing for a publisher? I'll give you a second to think about it. Sasha is very close. It proves that you can make a good game. The problem with a game that performed poorly is usually marketing, which if it was a marketing issue, that would not be your responsibility because you're a developer. You're not supposed to be good at marketing. That's what we have publishers for. So the fact that you might have made a good game that performed poorly due to powers outside of your controls or things that the publisher can do that they're confident about means that it's actually really good for them to find a game that was good but performed poorly, because it means that they'll get your game at a lower price and they'll be able to do the marketing correctly, right? So you're communicating this weakness now as an argument to collaborate. You might say, well, we shipped a previous game. It was a very good game. Here's a number of reviews. It performed very poorly because the marketing wasn't very good. We're just not very good at marketing. We're a small team. Now the publisher is more incentivized to work with you because they can offer a lower amount of money because you don't have that big success that allows you to ask for really big numbers as easily. And they know that they can do marketing well. Otherwise, they won't invest in you. Okay. The budget you're asking for is $150,000. But you're already spending $130,000. It seems like you're going to need additional work done worth $40,000. How do you make that work? How do you make these numbers work? Using DLC, scanning back, increasing budget. There's 2 very good answers there. Let me see. Let me just check real quick because I have just want to make sure. Yep, that the answers are ahead because I clearly put it in the wrong spot. I don't want to spoil on all your questions. So remember your answer for this one, and then we're going to go to the next question. See, this is I messed up the order. Okay. So the budget you're asking for was 150K. You're already spending 130K. It seems like you need additional work done worth 30K. How do you make it work? The answer is you increase the budget ask by 40K. That puts you back at 130%, right? Again, the additional work is 30K, but 30K is what you need. And we're never going to ask for just what we need. We're always going to end 30% on top of it. That 30% is our contingency, it's our profit, it's our certainty that if things go wrong, then we will have that money. So you increase the budget ask by 130% of what you additionally need, right? So make sure that you're always adding the margin in. Never forget about the margin. They have the money, they can give you the money. Put that margin in, be more safe, run your studio in a safer way. Now, say you have a team of very capable developers, very capable people, capable artists, capable developers, capable designers, but they've never shipped a video game. How can you, in your pitch, alleviate that risk? You could ship a title. That's a little intense of a solution. Make sure you have a plan with timelines. You make a prototype, team portfolio. That's the correct answer. The correct answer is increase your budget by the cost of an experienced developer or producer, plus 30%, add that margin. And then have some conversations with people who have already shipped games about whether they would come on board if you get the funding. That's basically it. You ask for more money. You ask for more money to hire somebody who has already shipped a game. Now, when you do that, you're not going to say, we're looking to hire this person. Again, I don't want to know where you are right now. I want to know the dream. And the dream is, in that case, that this person would be on board. So you're going to talk to a bunch of people that have shipped the game, producer, developer. You're going to say, hey, how much money would you want to work on this game? And if we get this money, would you be open to joining us? And they'd say, yes, you just include them as part of your team. Because if you get the money, then that's what the publisher is going to get. They're going to get that person on board. So you don't have to say we're going to hire or we're in conversation with. No, if they fund it and you've got the promise from the person that if you get the money, that they will come on board, they're just part of the team. None of this weak, like they might join. No. If you get the money, they join. So as far as the pitch is concerned, they're part of your team. Okay. You can lower your budget by 30% by living more frugally and not paying yourself a salary. And that way you can offset for the 30% margin. You'll be a much more affordable pitch. Is this a positive or a negative for the publishers? Seeing a negative, I'm seeing a doesn't care, negative, positive, negative. All right. It seems that your answers are overwhelmingly negative. The correct answer is negative. A lot of indies try to lower their budget to a point where it is unreasonable that they can pay everybody a good salary. Publishers are looking for certainty. You living at the edge of your ability financially is not certain. It means that if anything happens to you, the project dies. It means that if you have a kid, the project dies. It means that if you have a problem in your house, the project dies because you will need a job. You ask always for a comfortable salary. And I will tell you one golden rule right now. The golden rule is too low is worse than too high. Because if you come to me and it's a $200,000 project and you say, I want $300,000, I'm going to say, you know what? I think it's a $250,000 project. And then you say, okay, 275, and I'll say 260, and khalas, we're done. Right? That's it. If it's a $200,000 game and you come to me with $50,000 as the budget, I don't trust you. I think you're bad at business. You apparently can't even come up with a good business case where you can pay yourself. How am I supposed to trust your ability to make a game if I can't even trust your ability to pay yourself? Right? If I had a beautiful car for you, if I had a Porsche for you, brand new. It looks brand new, looks like a beautiful Porsche, and they say, you can't touch the Porsche. $5,000. You can't touch it, you can't look at it because it's not done yet. For $5,000, we'll get you a Porsche. Do you think I'm actually going to deliver you that Porsche? Or do you think I'm going to run off and take that money? Of course you think I'm going to run off and take that money. Nobody can deliver a Porsche for $5,000. That's not how it works. Publishers know how much a game costs to make. That's their business, right? They invest in games. So if you come in too low, they can't go to you and say, like, you know what? You said $50,000. We think you should ask for 100,000. They can't do that. They can't go to their boss and go like, hey, listen, great project, 50K. I told them they should ask for 100K. So now they're asking for 100K. They can't do that. So if you come in too low, they're just going to say no. If you come in too high, they're going to negotiate. So too low is worse per definition than too high, because too high you can negotiate, too low you cannot. When we're talking about this thing, the trick is consistently to maximize the opportunity we're offering to the publisher while we're minimizing our own risk. That's what we've been doing in all of these questions. We're trying to minimize our own risk. So we're trying to create certainty. We're trying to make sure that our budget is realistic. We're making sure that our timeline is being realistic. We're trying to maximize the opportunity. The reality is that the publisher cares so much less about money than you. They don't care. You're one of 6 investments this year, one of 12. If your game doesn't work out, too bad. But you have the money. You can make the game. That's how simple it is. So we now have a business case. If you've gone through all this, you have a business case. You've made the prototype. So you know your game. You now know your needs because we've established your needs. We've established the potential value of the game by doing that viability check. So we looked at the market, we looked at our competitors, and we learned that our budget is realistic for the amount of profit that we can be estimated to make. We've identified our opportunities. We've turned our weaknesses into strengths, or part of our pitch. So a business case, when you pitch a game, it kind of goes like this. Who saw which opportunity to make what? How can you as the publisher benefit? And what do we need to make that happen? So we're just going to validate that business case. So we're going to test the business case the same way you test the prototype. So we're going to validate who saw which opportunity to make what, how can the publisher benefit, and what do we need to make it happen? So the validation part kind of sits here. If everything went well, these things all kind of happen around the same time. You do your prototyping, your business case, then you do your vertical slicing, your pitching, then you do production and negotiation. This kind of all happen around the same time. If everything went well, that validation phase is while you're pitching. Most people start pitching after making the vertical slice. They do all that work to make the vertical slice, to make the art, to make the music, to make it sound good, to make it look good, to make 3 levels or 1, or I don't care how much stuff. Don't do that. Don't do that. You're looking to minimize risk. So you move risk away from you as fast as possible. If you're making a vertical slice, you're spending 3 months, 6 months making it. Do you need the vertical slice to sell your game? If you pitch and publishers ask, and they're interested, they'll ask for a demo. And then you can say, well, we're working on it. We'll have it for you in like 1 to 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is. If you already made the vertical slice and nobody likes it, nobody cares about it, then you've wasted 3 to 6 months of your life making something that nobody cared about. And you could have already checked 3 months earlier by just pitching. The prototype is good enough. It's good enough. So if nobody likes the thing you're pitching while you're starting work on the vertical slice, then it might just be time to look at the next project, do something else. You've only spent a month or something like it. You haven't spent 6 months of your life on this game yet. Too many people spend so much time before they start pitching, and it's a waste. It's a waste. So The pitch is not very different. If you are with me all the way until here, the pitch is not super complicated. You're going to communicate the business case. You're going to emphasize your opportunities. You're going to emphasize your strength. And you're going to de-risk your risks. There's a million good talks about pitching. But the important part is to remember that the pitch is not for your audience. It's not for your players. The game for the publisher is a means to an end. It's a means to make money. The business case is what we're selling, not the game. They'll tell you, oh, we love games. We want to hear about games. We care about creativity. Some of them do, some of them don't. But the people that sign the checks, they don't care about games. They don't care. It's not their job to care. It's their job to care about the money. So they're not the audience. Don't try to pitch your game the way you would pitch it to an audience. We're pitching the business case. And the business case is who saw which opportunity to make what, how can you benefit, what do we need? This is, in my opinion, the best structure for a pitch. And you'll find lots of talks that explain that you should start with a summary, including your budget. I disagree with those talks. I think you should keep the budget for the end. For the end, what do we need? The reason for that, say, let's go back to the car, right? Let's go back to the car example. I have a car for you. I want to sell you this car. And I tell you, this car is a $10,000 car. And let's say you can afford a $10,000 car, but it's expensive, right? It's very expensive, but you could afford the car. So it's a $10,000 car, and I say, okay, it has cruise control, it has heated mirrors, it has the interactive display is not touchscreen. It has a button. It's not a touchscreen. But it's a beautiful car. Now, all you heard is for this very expensive car, you're not getting a touchscreen because I told you the value, and the value is high, so you expect everything to be good, right? If I tell you, well, here's the car, it has automatic cruise control, the interactive device works with a button, it's not a touchscreen. I don't know, the car has 4 wheels and it's beautiful. And then I say it's $10,000. It's somehow easier because you had time to sort of evaluate the entire car as a whole, and you're not just laser focused on anything that isn't worth $10,000. So I say, keep the budget until the end, all the way at the end. Let's go through this. Who? What is our goal in the pitch? Our goal is to establish credibility, to tell the people listening, the people you're pitching to, that you are the right team for the game that you're about to pitch. Do you remember the dream that we started with? This is where the dream happens. This is where you explain the dream. You explain why you are making this. Usually this comes from who very well. You explain who you are and then what opportunity you saw. You're the ones making the game. Why are you making this game? What opportunity are you chasing that you believe nobody else is chasing? This is where your unique selling points go. Then we get to make what? What will the game be when you are done? Not right now. I don't care about now. Again, I'm going to keep emphasizing it. I don't care about now. What are you making? What is it going to be when you're done? You do not pitch where you are now. You can use where you are now to de-risk. If you're a new developer, they will want to see your prototypes because it de-risks, it proves that you can make the game. For first-timers, publishers will usually not be convinced enough, and they will ask for a demo, which you can then produce for them. But what the game will be when you are done? Again, this is also where your unique selling points can go. Now we get to how can you as the publisher benefit? If things are okay, the game itself is a clear benefit, but you also explain the market opportunity and you explain the budget viability. You explain that this game, if they invest $100,000, is probably going to make $300,000 or more. This is where you explain that the game has unique opportunities, that it fits their brand, that is going to make them money. And then finally, you explain the services that you need, your marketing and stuff like that. You explain the timeline. So when we go to the needs, we go through every need until we get to budget. You explain the services, you explain the timeline. Be clear about where you are in the timeline right now, right? If everything went well, at this point, the publisher has a number in their head. They've looked at your pitch and they're thinking, this could be a $1 million game. Let's see if it's a $1 million game, right? If they are thinking at the end of this pitch that it's a $1 million game, but you need your budget, the thing you're going to ask for is $750,000, you did it. That publisher will at least be interested to sign your game. Because it's as simple as that is. The closer their number is, the better your pitch was. Obviously, your number should always be lower because you're selling a dream. Reality still needs to happen. So if they're thinking $1 million and you're coming in at a $1.2 million, they're going to try to negotiate it down. That's fine, right? But if you can do your pitch and make them believe a number and then ask for a number lower than that number that still includes your margin, that still has everything you want, that pays you a good salary, then you've nailed your pitch. I have a few tricks for pitching. The first one is to pitch like a human. A lot of people practice their pitch too much. What you need to do is you need to know every element of your pitch so well that you can talk about it casually. A lot of people say like, well, you know, my team, our team is called, I don't know, Remarkable. And we are making a two-person first-person shooter, a two-player first-person shooter about shooting holes in donuts. Cool, I guess. Learn to pitch like a human. Learn to respond to questions with selling points. Learn to always emphasize your strengths, your opportunities, but make it sound natural. Then you pick a tone. With tone, I mean one of three things. I mean objective, subjective, or financial. Financial, I'm going to drop because it's not going to be relevant to you. The Among Us pitch, for example, if they were doing Among Us 2, that's a financial pitch. They're just going to go, hey, we made several $billion. We need $100 million to make this game. You'll probably make several $1 billion. That's a financial pitch, right? And then most people will say yes. Objective or subjective are a little more complicated. If you're doing a very mechanical game because you're a programmer, you're designers, they probably want to take a more objective tone with your game. You want to explain why the mechanics are interesting, what kind of players are going to be playing it. If you're doing a game that's more narrative, more art-based, you usually want to take a more subjective tone. You want to talk about the feeling that the game is going to elicit. Now, there's no correct answer here, but whatever you do, pick one of the two. Either be objective about your game or be subjective about your game. I think, in general, subjective pitches have a better chance of succeeding. Explain everything from that lens. Then finally, there's one trick that I want to add. Every slide in your pitch deck has a title. Even if you didn't put it on the title, it might be something like unique selling points, or it might be something like how many characters, or character overview. Here's the thing. Whatever the title, implicit or explicit, whatever the title of that slide, I want you to add mentally the title, comma, and why should you care? That's it. So when you tell me about the characters, I want the slide to be about the characters and why I should care, because the amount of times I hear in a pitch, we are going to have 16 characters. You think I give a you think I care? I don't care. I don't care about 16 characters because I don't know what 16 characters means. 16 different characters, 16 interesting characters, 16 similar characters, or the 16 characters a reskin. You haven't told me why I would care about characters. How many levels? I don't care. I just don't care. Are the levels interesting? Is this going to help people play the game more? Is it going to help people like the game more? That's what I want to know. I would much rather you tell me just in any way why I should care about something than that you explain to me how much you have of something. So, and why should you care? They're reaching out. This is going to be very simple. And from here, we're going to go really fast. Reaching out is very simple. There's a list online called Alan's Game Dev Resources Sheet. If you've never seen it, find it. It was made by a developer named Alan Dang. It is a giant list of every publisher out there that is invests in games with email address, with contact forms, with all the information you need to know whether they're a good fit for you. It's a list with several hundreds of publishers that invest in any range from $50,000 all the way to 10 million plus. It is free. Alan doesn't charge for it, doesn't need anything for it. If you do not have this list, find this list, download this list, keep this list. Now, on that list, there's going to be a number of publishers that you like, and there's going to be a number of publishers that you don't like. You can sort them by what platform they're on. You can sort them by the games that they've already published. What I want you to do is very straightforward. I want you to select every publisher in that list that releases on the platform you're going to release on. And then I want you to reach out to every single one. So many indies I talked to said, okay, we picked our 5 favorites and we reached out to them. And then they wait for 2 months and none of them reply. You don't pick favorites yet. You reach out to everybody. You send out those 300 emails. You spend a week of your life just sending out the same email to 100+ people. That's okay. You reach out to everybody. The people who get back to you, that's when you start picking favorites. They make a list of, I like these best, I like these least. And when you pitch, consider the publisher life. You want to have brevity. You get a lot of pitches. Keep your pitch concise, keep it to the point. Make sure that your email is short, that it shows what you're trying to do. Make sure that all the relevant documents are included. Don't tell them that if they're interested, you will send them the pitch. Send them the pitch. If you have a build, send them the build. Don't make them ask for stuff because they'll just ignore you, right? Now, if you've done this, then there might be a few publishers who are interested in your game. Your budget is fair. Your game has unique selling points, so we're good. We're going to keep moving. At that point, we get to the negotiations. If any publisher bites, you go into negotiations. Now, keep in mind that it's not just about money. There's a lot of things that publishing platforms can offer beyond money that are valuable to you. And it's important that you're, at this point, after the pitch, it's important that you're honest about your risks and about your opportunities. Don't be scared to ask for things that you need. If you need additional QA, ask for additional QA. If you need support with production, ask about support for production. This is the part to be very, very honest. Now, consider that you're going to be working together for a long time if it works. So prioritize options that give you a good feeling. Just if you have a better feeling at the end of a conversation than going in, that is a huge plus, even if they offer you less money. And again, honesty is key. You want to keep the context clear, but while you're communicating, always be de-risking, always be optimizing opportunity, but do not lie, do not make shit up. Do not tell them that you have an answer when you don't have an answer. And take your time. This is where you involve a lawyer, where you consult with consultants or mentors, where you discuss with your team. Take your time, it's important. There's no hurry at this point. They're already interested. And final, keep pitching. Until they write a signature on the contract, they don't have a right to tell you to stop pitching. They will try, they will make you feel bad. But do you think that they stop taking pitches because they're talking to you? No, of course not. They're still taking pitches. They want you to feel like you have to treat them like a special thing. When in reality, they're treating you as one of many. So keep pitching until the signature is there. My method for negotiation is very simple. I call it the backstop method. Take your offers, select the best one. That's called your backstop. Engage with your backstop, but do not push. Do not negotiate. You just talk to them about how you're excited to be talking to them. See if you can get a little bit forward, but don't try to make any number go up. Everybody else, everybody that isn't the backstop, everybody that isn't the best offer, you negotiate with them. And you try to push them above the backstop, more money, more time, less percentage, whatever it is, right? If one of the teams that wasn't a backstop now is better than the backstop, they become the backstop, and you repeat the process. You keep doing that, but when you get down to 2 or 3 options, pick the one you like best. Then after they sign, and only after they sign, inform the other publishers that you were talking to that you've accepted an offer. That's how simple it works. Create a backstop, push everybody else above the backstop. The people that won't go above the backstop, they get removed from the negotiations. Now we have a smaller group. You do the same thing. Push everybody above the backstop. Everybody who doesn't go gets removed. Eventually, when there's 2 or 3 left, pick from those 3. It's quite straightforward. It might feel a bit mean, but it's just business. And honestly, they're doing the same. If you're negotiating with them and negotiations are going really well and they go to PAX and they see a game that they like better than your game, they're just going to drop your game. It's just business, right? So make sure that you treat people well, that you're respectful, but also understand that this is business and that ultimately business will inform how things go. There's another term that gets asked about a lot, and it's called the recoup. It's another way to say break even, and it usually is the moment where the publisher breaks even on the investment plus the service cost. So if they make $100,000 investment, then they spent $40,000 of service costs, the recoup would be 140%. When they make the first dollar of your game, they're going to recoup towards that investment. They're going to take money back to make up for that money. Now, usually the way you get money from a publisher is split in 2. You've got basically, well, in 3. You've got your upfront, which is the amount of money you get when you sign or while you're developing your game. Then you've got your pre-recoup, which is the money before they've broken even. Then you've got your post-recoup, which is the money you get after they break even. Now, a lot of indies ask, how much? Well, the honest answer is the pre-recoup value really doesn't matter that much. The pre-recoup value, so the number of percentage, the percentage that they will take off the profit of the game before they break even, for new developers is usually 100%. If you get a really good one, you might get 80%. If you get an exceptional one, you might get 70%. But in most cases, the publisher is just going to take 100%. The post-recoup is far more relevant. Like, think of it this way. If your game does well, that's where the money is going to come from. It's from the post-recoup money. But if it does poorly, you're not going to recoup anyway. The amount of money lost there is going to be minimal. So where we're going to focus is that upfront, the money we get before we start. That's why we add that 30%. That's why we add that 30% to the timeline. And then on top of that, the 30% margin. If you can make a game, get paid for development, and keep a margin, a bigger team, more reputation, that achieves your goal. Because the goal, quite straightforward, is to ship a game and be back where we start. So keep in mind that the upfront is the money you get before launching. The backend is the money you get after launching, usually rev share. For first games, your upfront is more important than your backend, because for the publisher's point of view, you're risky. You've no proven record. So assume that if they're taking a risk on you, they'll try to recoup as fast as possible. And you're more focused on building a studio than just building a game. So for your first game, you focus on upfront over backend. For later games, you might want to focus on backend over upfront. At this point, your negotiations are going well. You're talking about everything, the contract. Now, I want you just to remember these things. Look it up later. If you ever are in negotiations, look it up later. Keep your IP. Do not accept a right of first refusal. Watch what is recouped, and do not allow self-spend. I'll go over them really quickly one by one. Keeping your IP means that you own the rights to the IP of the game, which means that you can make more games in that IP, or that you can make different games in that IP without publisher permission. Now, the publisher obviously doesn't want that. So what they'll usually include is something called a right of first refusal. A right of first refusal basically means that if you make a next game in the same IP, or sometimes even just any next game at all, the right of first refusal means that you have to make an offer to the publisher for which they could publish the game. That has to be a reasonable offer in good faith. Then the publisher gets to say whether they want the game or do not want the game for that offer. If they do not want the game, that's when you can start pitching to other developers or publishers. If they do want it, you have to sign with them. So right of first refusal removes any ability of you to negotiate future games, which is terrible, because your next game, you're going to have shipped a game and you're going to be in much better position to get much more money for your game. So right of first refusal is an absolute no. Finally, watch what is recouped. What are they recouping? Are they just recouping their investment? Are they recouping their investment plus marketing costs plus localization costs? And are some of the services that they're provided offered by their own company? Some publishers have internal QA and have internal QA, internal localization teams, and they will recoup the costs for the people that work at their own company as part of their recoup. But that means that they can make those costs really high, because they're gonna recoup it, that's your money, and pay themselves with it. That's called self-spend. If you see self-spend, do not allow it. If they want to do localization internally, that doesn't come out of your budget. It just doesn't. It shouldn't. If it's internal, that's no expense for them. They already have the people. You should not be paying for that. Then check your and their responsibilities. Specifically, what do you have to deliver and what do they have to deliver? Soft things mean nothing here. If it says publisher will do marketing to the best of their ability, that means absolutely nothing. It also doesn't say game developer will make video game to the best of their ability. It says, here's the milestones, here's what you need to do, here's when you need to do it. So do not accept vague responsibilities. Make sure the responsibilities are defined. Now, the other thing you want to watch for is your timelines, the payments, and the acceptance of milestones. How is the timeline defined? When do you have to submit things? What happens if you submit a milestone? How long can they take to tell you whether the milestone is good? If they are late, does that give you more time for the next milestone, or does your milestone stay in place? You want to be very careful that you do not get in a situation where they are 3 months late telling you that your milestone is good, which means you have 3 months less to deliver your next milestone because you're still waiting for feedback on the previous one. And finally, when do payments happen? At what moment do they pay after accepting a milestone? Do they pay you immediately? Is there a month delay? How do they pay you? How much do they pay you? Make sure that you're checking for when payments happen. And finally, look for termination clauses. What happens when you don't deliver a milestone? What happens when they don't do their work? How can you get out of the contract? And what happens in different cases of failure of the contract? What happens when you don't deliver a milestone? Do they take your IP? Do they get the right to their money back? Those are all terrible things. Do not allow those to happen. What happens if you want out of the contract because they're not doing good marketing, or they're not taking your game seriously, they're not paying on time? How can you get out of that contract at that point? Make sure that those termination clauses are things that you look into. Now, keep in mind that both me and you were not lawyers. So talk to your lawyer. If you don't have a lawyer, get a lawyer. Contracts are super cryptic, even if they don't seem it. Most words in contracts have specific legal meanings or reason. The back and forth can take a while. There's a contract called redlining where your lawyer or you will basically mark things you don't like with a red marker, and contracts go back and forth getting redlined a few times. Be honest. Be honest with what you need. If you have multiple things that you want to change, my pro tip: push one thing, ask for one thing that you're pretty sure they're not going to give you. So say you want milestones to be approved in 14 days, but currently it's 30 days. But you also you think that they won't pay the milestone within 7 days of approval because it's currently 1 month. What you could do is you could say, okay, what I would like is I would like the milestone to be approved within 2 weeks, and I would like to be paid within 7 days. And then they'll say, well, listen, we can't do the 7-day payment. Accountancy just takes a little bit more time. But you know what? We can give you the 14 days, the milestone approval, right? So push for something that they're absolutely not going to change, and then also push for something that you think they will change. And then they'll say no to the thing they don't want to change and yes to the thing that you want to change. So if you want to change something, find something that they're less likely to change and also ask for that. If they agree with both, all the better. And finally, development. Contract is done, you sign, you get the money, and you are now making games using someone else's money. Now, obviously, they'll make money off of you too, probably, but the risk is theirs, and the years of development are yours. So, hooray, making a video game being paid by somebody else. If you've asked for the right amount of upfront, you have enough money to make the game plus 30%. You're already making a profit even before the game sells a single copy, which means at the end of the development process, if you indeed ship the video game, you'll have shipped the video game. You have 30% of the budget as free money on your bank account. You can start talking about your next game. Yay. So final things I wanted to say. From pitch to signing usually takes about 6 months. So make sure that you are ready with a new pitch a few months before completion of your current game. If you're working on the first game, a few months before you ship it, make sure that you're already dreaming about the next game. Make sure that you make games, you focus on games, because after that first game, it's about continuity. It's about keeping that studio running. It's about making sure that you slowly move from minimizing risks to maximizing opportunity, because you can take the risk now, because you have the money, because you have the team, because you have the reputation. That's where the big bucks are. For now, just make some video games. That's it. That's how you make video games in 100 slides in such a way that you do not lose money and ship a video game. Hope that helps. Oh, 101 slides. Wow, that's... I'm sorry, I lied. I thought it was 100 slides, but it's 101. 1 hour 30. That was pretty fast. I don't know if we have time. If we have time, I would love to do some Q&A. If we don't have time, I also fully respect that. I went a little long, but I'll wait for questions or for the goodbye.
No, we do have some time, so
Let's go.
It's up to you and everybody else. And you have 2 hands raised. I don't know if you can see them.
No, not me. Okay.
No. We have Muhammad, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Rami.
Hi.
And I'm Muhammad Abdelaziz from Egypt.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. There is a specific point here because I'm QA, and so there is a specific point here that interested me. When you said that you try at the first, when you make games at the beginning, to include the QA in your process. How many game developers company, indie developers company that you saw that have included that process, either by the process itself or someone in as
good question. I think
I am asking because from what I saw, and I wasn't part of that much, of course, but from what I saw is very, very little include that process, the QA.
No, it's an increasing number, but it is still a low number. What has been proven and what continues to be proven in the indie scene is that even if it's small QA cycles, if you just do a QA cycle at production, at alpha, at beta, then when you do final QA and when you do platform QA, you're going to be in a much more stable place because you already have caught a lot of the biggest issues much earlier. Now, obviously, part of this is also whether the publisher allows it. And for example, Devolver Digital allows earlier QA than a lot of other publishers might, because there's just an expense involved. So this is something that indies are increasingly pushing for. It's not as frequent as it should be. Like really, you know, QA throughout the development process should be a default, but with my apologies on behalf of the industry, we haven't really treated QA super well in general, right? So I believe QA throughout the process is extremely important. I think what you do as a job is probably one of the most important jobs in games. I always joke that, and this, I don't remember where I heard the joke, but you know, game developers make bugs and QA help find them. That's kind of our job. So it's developing. It's not as frequent as it should be, but it is ever increasing.
Okay, well, we can, Shadi, if you want to go ahead.
I hope you're doing well. It is an honor to be talking to you. I just had a few questions. I'm sorry if there are more than one. Do you mind, or is...
No, let's go. If they're very long questions, then we'll keep it to one. But if they're short questions, we'll do a few.
Okay, so I was making a game like a few years ago. I'd say like 2.5 years ago, and it was part of a niche genre back then.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, it has grown a lot, and it has a lot more competitors whose release dates happen to also be around the year I'm releasing the game, which is this year. And I was wondering if there is like still a point in releasing it, knowing that there might not be much room for competition for someone without a publisher and with someone in a single
I mean, how long have you been working on the game?
About 2.5 years.
And how much is left before you can release it?
2 months, 3 months.
Yeah, then release it. Like that. Here's the thing. Even if your chances are much lower, there's no reason not to finish the game at this point. Because again, a ship title means a lot in this industry. Even if it's just your 3rd ship title or your 1st ship title or your 10th ship title, whatever you ship is a feather in your cap, right? So there's no good reason not to ship the game, even if there is more competition. And yeah, let's be very honest. If you've worked on a niche for 2 years, 2.5 years, and now a bunch of publishers have jumped on it, that's just really unfortunate timing. All you can hope for is that your game gets word of mouth, or that the attention on the genre from these bigger games will cause people to also check out your game. But let's assume for now that the game is not going to make a lot of money, right? Finish it, ship it, start working on something else. And for next time, again, move the risk to somebody else. It sounds really romantic to self-fund it, but you've just, I guess, self-funded for 2 years. And now this happened.
I haven't paid a lot on it, to be honest, because
Right.
back when I started 2 years ago, not a lot of people in like my country, at least, or at least I didn't see a lot of them, actually ship titles and make titles in the
Right.
country. A lot of them were like diaspora or whatever. So I didn't really have the vision that we'd get to this point, you know?
Right.
And
No, I mean, congrats. You've almost shipped a video game. That's awesome.
And even until this point, because of an economic crisis and a bunch of stuff that happened in my country, I decided to make the game free and to maybe support it through like added stuff that I put on later.
Awesome. If that doesn't take more development time, because again, like you said, there's a big chance that the market is going to be saturated. So finish the game as fast as you can with, you know, keeping in mind quality. Don't add new features. Don't add new ways of buying things. Just ship the game. Then start working on your next thing.
And I wanted to ask another question, which is when I'm pitching the game, I started pitching it fairly recently because no one looked at the game before, and now that it had like this whole like visual glow up and whatever, people, like more eyes came on the game anyways. So a lot of studios tell me that their main issue with helping me is not only that I haven't shipped the game, but it's also that I am also a singular person.
Right. This goes back to that risk, right? You're risky, but I'll be very honest with you. Whatever publishers tell you right now is nonsense. I'll tell you why they don't want to fund or support your game. It's because your game is almost done. Think of it this way: when you come to me and you have a game, right? You have a game idea, and you've only made 5% of it. You're asking for say $50,000, right? Then I'm going to pay you $50,000 because you can't prove the value much further above that, right? The closer you get to finishing your game, the more clear it is how much the game is going to make. Which means that the amount of money you could ask and probably should ask goes up. Because hopefully during development, you've increased the game's value, right? Like sometimes that's not how it works, but usually that's what you want to happen, is that the value of the game has increased throughout development. So at that point, they're paying more and you're more accurate in your estimate, which means that their potential for revenue, their potential for profit goes down. So publishers just don't like investing in games that are almost done. And they'll give you a million reasons why that is, that are just things that you can't fix, you can't do anything about it. You know, oh, you're only one person, or yeah, what are you going to do about it?
So it goes back to the fact that I should be pitching a case rather than a game.
And much earlier. Right. And you can't do that anymore. So what I would recommend is just ship this.
All right. And the last thing I wanted to say more, but I feel like I'm taking too much time. Anyways, the last thing I wanted to say is that if I'm a university student or I'm going to my master's for a backup plan, right? Does that also like pose a risk for publishers, let's say, with my next game?
I mean, the idea that you're going to have a master, or the idea that you're going to be in university?
The idea that I'm going to be working on a master as I work on games.
Yeah, no, that's a risk to the publisher, because you're splitting your time across two things. If you're going to do that, bring somebody else on board that can work on it full time.
All right.
And then just up your budget, right? Just ask for more money, because I don't know how much money, like, can you give me a ballpark number of what you were going to ask for this current game? Like 50,000?
Nothing. It was below
right.
10,000. I was going to ask for a lot.
So also nobody's going to take that, because again, think about it this way, right? The publisher is looking to 3x their investment. Okay. What is 3 times 10?
30.
30. So the maximum profit they can make off of your game, according to their own calculations, is $20,000. But to do that, they're going to have to ship the game. They're going to have to do, gonna have to put a producer on it. They're going to have to put marketing on it. They're going to have to put a localizer on it. Just the expenses are bigger than the profit that they're calculating for a game, because $10,000 is such a little amount of money that for them, it's not even lunch, right? So I think, you know, I don't think you're going to get the game pitched anymore because it's too close to release. I would just ship it. But if I was pitching something like that, I would be pitching it at $100,000 plus. Because that sounds a lot more confident. If you're like, I'm almost done, I'm asked for $10,000, that doesn't really show that you have a lot of faith in this game making money. Because if I would settle for $10 as a publisher, and you're asked for $10,000, that means you're expecting this game to sell 1,000 copies. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to waste a producer on that if I was a publisher.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense. Yeah.
So when you think about these things, a lot of developers are coming from the wrong side. Like I said, you have to stop thinking about money the way you think about money. For us as people, $10,000 is a lot of money. For you as a game developer, $10,000 is 3 months of salary for a single person. And I know, you know, throughout the region, $10,000 is a lot of money, but that's not none of their problems. The problem is that you're going to ask for the amount of money that you think you can triple. And if you think you can make $1 million with the game, then your budget should be $300,000. Okay. And then you make it work. Then you fill out the team. Then you find the people. Then you make the timeline. Then you figure out the salaries. And the salary for you can be $5,000 a month. Yeah, it's a lot. But if they can triple it, then I will just give it to you, right? If you can convince me that if I give you $5, you're going to give me back $15, why would I not give you $5?
Yeah.
So
okay.
Ship this one. If you're going to do a master's for your next game, make a game with a team. Work with 2-3 people.
All right. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. Plus you can ask for more money then. So that's cool.
All right.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shadi. Ronald, why don't you go ahead?
Hello.
Hello.
I have a few questions, if you don't mind.
I'm sorry.
I'm the solo developer of Road to Eden. I released Road to Eden in 2019,
Mhm.
and I released it in early access.
Mhm.
So, and now I'm working on a sequel to Road to Eden.
No.
So I prepared all the necessary material, and I presented to a lot of
Publishers.
publishers,
No.
and I have a pre-alpha. So it's I have recorded footage of the pre-alpha. I have the pre-alpha. I have
No.
everything is there.
Mhm.
So and I get a lot of you're high risk because you're a solo developer.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have. I listened to what you answered.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
don't know if you have
you're
anything.
early in development, it sounds like.
It's pre-alpha. I have the systems.
Right.
70% of the systems
Well,
in.
what do you think
but-
what do you think I'm gonna answer?
Well, I'm confused at this point. So
But your problem, your risk is that you're only one person.
yeah.
How do
So
you solve that?
is that true or
No, yeah,
or-
absolutely. If you get sick, the game is done. If I give you $1 million to make a video game and you die, then my $1 million is gone.
Yeah, but the pitch is that the money is going to get a bigger team. So this was the
Right.
pitch.
So at
Am I
that
doing
point,
something wrong?
yeah, you're not saying that you have a team. You're saying that you're getting a team.
Oh, I need to get the team first.
Talk to the people that you want to hire.
Okay.
Right. Find the people that you want to hire. Not all of them, but the majority of them. The most important one.
Okay.
Talk to those people and tell them, listen, I have a game. I'm pitching the game. It's going well. If I can ask them what salary they want, ask them how long they want to work on the game, ask them what their availability is, get everything done as if you are going to hire them, but tell them that we're going to make this agreement. And when I get the money, if I get the money, I'm going to hire you.
Okay.
And
I
if they
put
say
them in the
okay,
pitch.
you put them in the pitch as if they're already working on the game, because when you
Okay.
get the money, they're going to be on the team. So you don't have to say if, you just say I do.
So this is not considered lying or
No, because that's the pitch. You're selling a business case, and a business case
Okay.
involves those people being on the team. You don't have to say I'm currently working with these people. You say this is what the team is going to be.
Okay.
Done.
My other question is, well, actually, it's what you answered is really important,
Mhm.
and I think it'll work. But my second important question is, my first game is early access.
Mhm.
Is this a liability to the publisher?
No, I mean, early access really, like, was it received well?
Yeah, it's positive, and it's
Khalas.
it's being developed. It's still being developed since
Right.
2019. So
I mean, yeah, then I can extra understand why they think it's a risk that you're a solo developer, because you're also split across 2 games, right? But the reality is that if it's shipped and it's positive, yeah, it's good. That's great. Just make sure that you emphasize that you're going to be focused on this next game, or that you're going to have the team that's going to be focused on this next game. Because if you tell me I need X amount of money, and I don't know what you're asking for, but assuming you're asking for a team and you're asking for what, 2 years of development time, I would guess that you're somewhere in the $200,000 region.
yeah.
If you're in the $200,000, $300,000 region, then I want to make sure that if I give you $200,000 and the other game starts making $1 million a month, that you don't drop my video game.
Oh wow.
Right? If the other game suddenly goes viral and it starts making $1 million a month, and I gave you the money to release that game, then I want to make sure that you don't abandon the game to work on the $1 million game.
Even if I have a team for the other game, it's. I mean,
if you can show that team can work on the game, if you can make
Okay.
that clear, then khalas, it's good. But if I'm worried that you're needed for the game and you might just disappear to work on the other game that makes you more money, then yeah, no, I'm going to be a little concerned about that. So make very clear what the idea of the game is. You can explain that you have an existing community from an early access game that you're working on, and that you're working on the second game. It's not a sequel.
The sequel, yeah.
It's a sequel. So you're starting work on the sequel in parallel with the original. You're continuing development on the original to make sure that when the sequel comes out, the audience is excited about it and that
Exactly.
yeah. So if you explain
There's
it
al-
that way,
There's
it's good.
already traction on the second game, so
Beautiful.
it's on Twitter. It's everywhere. It's,
So that the traction is a positive. The fact that it's on Twitter is a negative, right? It doesn't matter, by the way, any traction is, if the traction is good enough, it's positive. But the fact that it's public means that the publisher can't figure out when they want to do the review anymore. And usually they work with companies like Nintendo or Microsoft or PlayStation to do the review. Now, obviously, in your case, it's a sequel to a game that has an existing community, so it's good that you put it out there and that there's traction. But for pretty much everybody else listening, keep in mind that the announcement of your game is a bargaining chip. If you can give the announcement of your game to a publisher, then they can work with Nintendo or Microsoft or Sony to make a deal for the exclusive review of the game. Right? So in your case, you made the right choice. You have an existing community. That community is going to be your front line. They're the people that are going to be talking about the game. They're the people that are going to be promoting the game. If that's a large enough group, beautiful, right? Don't rely on anybody else.
Would 1,000 people be a good number?
I mean, 1,000 people. If you guess that out of 1,000 people, 700 will buy the next game, yeah, that's not a bad start.
It's the Discord community. I have around 1,100 people on the Discord community.
Keep growing that. 1,100. You know, from a publisher point of view, it's not a lot, because if 1,100 people buy the game at $20, you know, that's I mean, that's not terrible, but also it's not enough to make them back their money, right? Assuming that they're investing $200,000. But it's good to know that there's a group of people that are very excited about the game, because the publisher has way more reach than you. So if you, as a solo developer, can already reach 1,100 people, imagine what a publisher that's actually like has a marketing department, what they can reach, right? So your community is proof of the success of the game, which 1,100 is not a lot of people, but it's enough to be significant. So, you know, overall, I still think you made the right choice. Like, working with the community, building it together with them is really good. Just don't push it too much in public right now. You know, keep that Discord community, the community where you're talking, because the less you talk on public platforms, the less you talk on Twitter, on Reddit, on platforms like that, the easier it is for the publisher to have a big reveal still. They can still do it, right?
But how can I get traction without talking about the game?
Well, because you're going to go really fast on this pitching thing, right? You're going to pitch right now. Okay. So as soon as the pitch is done, if somebody signs, it's not your problem getting traction anymore. That's their problem. They're doing marketing. You already got the money.
Okay.
So traction for now, forget about traction for a moment. For now, focus on get it signed. If you get it signed, awesome. Not your problem anymore. You can work with the publisher on building more traction. And they will probably say something like, we're going to try and put it in a Nintendo Direct if the game comes out on Switch, or we're going to work with Microsoft to do an exclusive review, or we're going to talk to Jeff Keighley and see if he wants to put it in something. And that'd be cool, right?
Of course.
In exchange, they get help from those platforms. So the platforms will say, thank you, we'll take the exclusive review, and in exchange, we'll put 2 of your games on the front page of the store.
Okay. One last question.
Final one.
Final one, yeah. Well, what happened is I got a lot of negotiations about the $200,000.
Yeah.
And at a time I decided to fund the game myself and go for crowdfunding. Would this be a sane decision, or I mean, it's
no. Okay, so remember the minimizing risk thing, right? We're still in minimizing risk, which means, think of it this way: if you talk to every publisher in the world and they all say no, and then you make a Kickstarter, is your Kickstarter affected by the fact that every publisher in the world said no? No,
Okay.
Nobody on Kickstarter knows that you've talked to all those publishers, right?
Yeah.
If you do a Kickstarter and it fails, and then you want to talk to publishers, is your
That would be
chance with the
very-
publishers affected by your Kickstarter failing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So the order
Really?
has to be, you talk with the publishers first. And if they all say no, you can't get the offer you want, then you go crowdfunding.
Amazing.
The short rule, I always tell people, it's the same rule every time. If you can, and you're gonna do something that can fail, do it in private first. Fail in private first. And then after you fail in private, then do the thing that can fail in public.
All right. Thank you very much.
So,
Amazing. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Ronald. Rafif, if you want to go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Yes, hi Rami, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm okay. So my name is Rafif Clinton. I'm currently doing a master's degree on game design and development in the UK. So hopefully I'll see you in 2 weeks in Brighton.
I'll be there. Inshallah.
Inshallah. So I have a couple of questions. 2 of them are probably going to be very straightforward. The other one might be a bit longer to answer. So the first question is based on your experience. What do you think the success rate for publishers and investors investing in studios that are based in the MENA or SWANA region?
I think I don't think there's so the last numbers I saw is I don't think there's a notable difference between investment success percentage, because from the publisher point of view, it is a video game, and where it is doesn't matter much. What I have seen is that generally the costs of investing in a game in the MENA region are lower, but for publishers, the setting up the logistics is more complicated. So dealing with the financial system, dealing with labor laws, rights, lawyers, stuff like that is more complicated. For example, it's a not very well-known fact, but working with Europeans as an American company is actually remarkably risky, because well, in the US, you can sign away something called your moral rights. In the EU, it's impossible to sign away your moral rights. So that clause in every US contract is invalid in Europe, which means that, if you're a musician, somebody buys your rights and they use the music in a way that you morally object to, as a European, you can say, no, you can't do that, even if you sold the rights to the music. So for those publishers, they would have to do research as to what the local laws are and how they affect their local contracts, right? But when they do invest, they invest because they believe the game is going to do well with their audience, and the percentage of success is not affected by where the game comes from.
Wonderful. I did not know that about different legislations. So the other question is slightly similar to what Shadi has asked before, which is as a way to elevate risk, do you think that even if you have a small project that is more of a clone of whatever game that already exists, do you think it is better to ship it or publish it on itch.io or a similar website as a way to elevate risk for publishers?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the best answer is to ship it in whatever way feels fair to it. If you have the $100, put it on Steam if you think it might do well on Steam, but just ship the thing, right? The more commercial it seems, the better it is for future negotiations. So if you have a small thing, it's experimental. If you have the $100, put it on Steam. If you don't, put it on itch.
Wonderful. So the last question is the one that might take a bit longer, which is, so as a part of my course, we have to present a demo during EGX in September.
Oh, cool.
So I was wondering, what do you think, from your point of view, is a good approach on showcasing a demo in something like EGX or an indie showcase in order to attract publishers and investors?
I mean, what you want to do is you want to think about, okay, what kind of publishers are going to be there and what will they be interested in? In general, what publishers want to see is something that stands out. So You're going to be between a lot of indie games. EGX has the Left Field collection, which is a lot of experimental games. If your work is more on the experimental side, and it sounds like you're doing smaller, more experimental games, then I would focus on a very good vertical slice for the demo. Several minutes of gameplay. Make sure that your demo self-resets so that you have time to talk to people instead of having to like fix the demo every single time. But make the demo easy for you to manage and make it stand out. Make it something that they're not seeing in another game. One thing I've found is if you can make it so that your demo elicits a big response from people, that really helps it showcases. So don't pick like, if you're gonna pick a moment that has an impact on people, whether it makes them yell in happiness or like sit quietly and sort of reflect. It doesn't really matter, as long as as long as it's clear to the audience that is walking by that something is happening at your booth.
Okay. Well,
that makes sense.
It made sense to me.
All right, good.
Answering right now. Are you okay with taking a couple more questions, Rami, just before we go on?
Yeah, let's try and wrap it up in 10 minutes.
For sure. We have 3 more people that have their hand raised.
No, let's do it.
Awesome. Rawan, why don't you go ahead?
Hello.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi.
I hear you.
I'm Rawan Al-Far from Namadroid Studio in Riyadh. It's nice to meet you again, Rami. I have a question. Maybe you just mentioned it in the session. I just joined at the middle. What can we consider red flags in publishers?
Right. I mean, red flags in publishers. So first in the contract section here, like publishers trying to keep your IP, publishers trying to have right of first refusal, publishers trying to self-spend, which means that they're recouping funds that they're spending on people that already work for them. If they have an internal localization team, you should not be paying for that localization team because they're already employed by that company. Unclear responsibilities, unclear timelines, unclear payments, unclear acceptance of milestone, unfavorable or unfair termination clauses. Those are all bad. But most importantly, you want to make sure that that you feel good about the conversations, that you feel like you're being listened to. So my major red flags with publishers is they don't have published games or don't have published games similar to what you're trying to publish. Now that's more of like an orange flag, because if you can't get anybody else, then it's good enough, just make sure your upfront is high enough. But uncertainty, publisher trying to push you, publisher trying to make you make decisions faster, publisher giving you a bad feeling or being unreliable, those are red flags. So make sure that you avoid those red flags.
Okay, good. I have another question, which is how can we reach publishers? Is it like just we visit their websites or send them email? That's okay.
And I mentioned earlier in the talk as well, there is a list called Alan's list of game dev resources. I think somebody noted down the URL, but if you can find that URL, it basically is a list of like 300 plus publishers with email address and contact forms. So
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, like I said, when you're going to reach out, send it to everybody on the list that publishes on the platform you're aiming for. Don't pick favorites. Reach out to everybody, and then from the people that respond with interest, then pick your favorites.
Okay. Thank you so much.
No worries. Oh, wow.
Amazing. Thank you, Rawan.
No worries.
HK, if you can go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, first of all, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Okay, I'm Hamad Puri, HK. and like from my nickname that I wrote. I'm the president of like in my university we have a game development club. So like
Cool.
American University of Sharjah. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for the informative session. Like, it's opened so many horizons that I have like thought of. I haven't thought of.
I'm glad to hear that.
Like my experience with game development, like, and like my interactions with people who I know, like people who are starting, they're just hobbyists, like who like to learn about programming or about art. And like since I opened like a game development club, I slowly discovered that I can like grow an audience. Like I started making like a game for my university, and like I got to play test some games like in the UAE. There are like I have heard so many stories like of some game developers or like some two publishers just closed. Like it's pretty hard, not that too much harsh, but people can like get good connections with other people who have like more experience with game development. I just wrote something in the chat how to get a game dev from a hobby to me. Yeah, like I wanted to seek some advice since like I have a game development club. Like I'm just making a game like just for, the thing is I'm making it for fun. Like it's not to get a budget. I'm making an audience to engage with, and like I like to teach them about game development. And like it goes on. So far, we are getting used to like advertise on the internet, like in specific regions in Sharjah or in Dubai. Like that's the places in the UAE.
Yeah. So what is the question?
I'm not sure if it's a question. I'm just like, I want to seek advice like from someone who is more of a professional, who sees things in a professional way.
Right.
Like we're just like making things out of our hobby.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's a very valid way of doing game development. If you don't care to make it commercial, then you don't have to. That's kind of beautiful, honestly. I wish more people could do it uncommercially, but it requires certain stability in your life to be able to make games without trying to make money off of them. So if your goal is just to engage people and you don't have to care about the money part, like, you know, Mabruk, that's awesome. If you say like, no, there is a commercial perspective to this that I just haven't considered, then maybe it might be worth just actually having a phone call about it at some point, and then you can go to my website, book.ramiismail.com, and then pick the free phone call, and we'll just talk about it for a bit.
Oh, all right. Thank you so much. I will check that out. Thank you.
Okay, folks. Last question, Muhammad.
Yeah. Sorry, Rami, but because I'm QA, you have a Y missing in the word payment.
Yeah, I saw it in chat. I also have a few slides that are in the wrong order. I made some notes like on the site, but shukran for pointing it out. If I had missed that, it'd be good. Yeah. I'm giving this exact talk in a few days in Brighton, actually. So having the slides updated would be good. So
okay,
I'll fix it. Thanks for QA testing my presentation.
No problem. You are welcome. But
awesome.
I have another question that not about game development in per se, but
okay.
I'm thinking about going to Gamescom in Germany.
Cool.
August. Is it a good way for try to find recruiting?
Yeah, it is. The Gamescom business area is one of the best connected business areas in the games industry. Just note that you have to get a trade visitor ticket. So the trade visitor ticket, you need to apply for it. You need to have a game studio for it. or you need to work for some sort of institute in games. So whether you're working for a school or a game studio, or whether you're your own game studio, it doesn't really matter. But it's important that you can prove that you are in the games industry in a professional capacity.
But I'm sorry, I meant that I want to apply for the companies, not recruiting.
Yeah. So the same thing, but the thing is, to go to the part of Gamescom where you can do that, you need a trade visitor ticket.
Okay.
So, and you only get a trade visitor ticket if you can prove that you have a professional connection to the games industry. So whether that is from a company that you're working at, or a school that you're at, or maybe anybody that is here, it can put you under their company for the event, but you need to prove to Gamescom.
Yeah, I'm working in a small studio called 1336 Studios.
Okay, yeah, cool. So then, you know, like you're gonna need to put that on your Gamescom application.
Okay.
Then if you get a trade visitor ticket, it's really worth going to Gamescom. If you don't get a trade visitor ticket, do not go to Gamescom. The public area is the worst smelling thing I've been to in my entire life. It is miserable. It is sweaty. It is disgusting. It just, I've never smelled anything as bad as the public area of Gamescom. Do not go there. But if you can go to the trade part of Gamescom, 100% go there.
Sorry, but is it cost more than?
Yes, I think the trade visitor ticket is €100, and it requires that you prove that you're in the games industry, and the public area is 30. But as part of the trade visitor ticket, you also get access to the public area.
Okay.
So then you can run in, smell how bad it is, and then run back to the safe trade
Yeah.
visitor area. Note that the trade area is only open from Wednesday to Friday.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Cool.
That was it.
Awesome.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Rami. Honestly, this was awesome. And I'm sure everybody here was as happy as I was to have you.
It was my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Great, fantastic. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Rami, again for the talk.
Yeah. Can I do one more quick thing?
Please do.
If anybody have any questions that they didn't feel comfortable asking here, or they didn't feel we had time for it, or they include, like, you know, confidential information or anything, feel free to reach out to me. I gave the link earlier. I will give the link again. It's book.ramiismail.com. There is a free 20-minute phone call that you can take if you live in any emerging territory, which most of the region falls under that. So if you just head to book.ramiismail.com and then pick the free emerging territory only call, we can just set up 20 minutes to talk about what your problem was if you didn't feel comfortable doing that here.
Awesome. And you can follow Rami on Twitter @_Rami.
I can not guarantee that that is a smart idea.
It's fine. I don't think it's fine. It'll be fun. Lots of Habibi tweets. Inshallah, it'll be
Inshallah.
so cool, wonderful. Thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Rami, again, and I guess we'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Salam. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.